Our next speaker is Susan Mills, who is a visual artist and poet who works in book form. Her books are one of a kind or small editions of 2 to 100. Her work is rooted in conceptual art, the New York School, and in recycled materials. Her books are produced without the use of a printing press and are hand-bound using innovative structures, bindings, and materials. In 2024, she tabled at the Codex International Art Book Fair in Oakland, the Halifax Art Book Fair, had a solo show of artist books at Hermes Gallery in Halifax, and was a featured artist at Nuit Blanche in Saskatoon. She's work included in a radical alteration, women's studio workshop as a sustainable model for art making, touring in the US for 3 years, including at the Washington Museum for Women in the Arts. Thank you, Susan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Elijah. Thanks for having me. Thanks to all the speakers, to all the symposium organizers. Thanks to everyone for being here today in person and in Zoom. Um, for people on Zoom, I'll be keeping my camera off and the images on, so hope that works for you. I'm going to primarily speak about four newer books, but I thought I would give you some background as I came of age before artist books were institutionalized. This is the view from my studio window in Nova Scotia. And this is the view from my studio in New York City. The view from a couple of blocks away from my studio window in Saskatchewan on Boxing Day. And this is a tiny house in the boreal forest. It looks like an Airbnb, but I built it 10 years ago to be sustainable senior housing. Due to family medical issues, I've not moved in full time. I'm hopeful for summer of 2026. The multiple studio locations are also for family medical issues. I try to take a glass half full view. Um, this is an early artist book. It's an edition of one, hand-bound with shirt cardboard and medical tape. My earlier books were crayon drawings with recorded original audio text. When I started school, I decided my own art and stories were unprofessional, and I started copying out standard poems with collaged images from magazines. So this is Little Jumping Joan. Here I am, Little Jumping Joan. When nobody's with me, I'm always alone. I drew the skipping rope. A little later, a neighborhood artist gave me a spiral notebook and a set of colored pencils and suggested I write my own story and draw my own pictures, and that if she liked it, she would buy it, which she did, enabling me to buy another notebook and to begin again. This is the artist, writer, publisher on the far right with her siblings. This is grade 8. It's a spiral bound notebook artist book, edition of one. Black and white line drawings taped in place with handwritten text, 25 of my own poems and 25 of my own drawings. I felt black and white ink looked most like a commercially published poetry book. I was influenced by Sylvia Plath's Ariel and Leonard Cohen's The Spice Box of Earth and Joni Mitchell's song lyrics. You can now see the brown tape residue. I got an A plus in the lower right-hand corner. This is from high school. It's a spiral bound drawing book, artist book, edition of one. Handwritten original poems and black and white analog photos shot, developed, printed, and glued in place by me. Oops. 30 poems and 30 photos. It was another A plus. Teenage me at Emma Lake Summer Workshop for professional artists in northern Saskatchewan. My high school didn't have portfolio prep for college admission. I applied to art college with my artist books, but wasn't successful. So I got a job up north and spent the next few years at summer painting workshops at Emma Lake and in the Qu'Appelle Valley, Saskatchewan, and at the Banff Center. I sold a lot of drawings and paintings in Banff, always my best work, always encouraged to sell by my instructors and to move on to new work. I have followed this advice throughout my career. In Banff, I met some of the artist teachers from New School of Art, three schools here in Toronto, and was accepted into their 2-year not-for-credit program. Another spiral-bound drawing artist book edition of one. When I packed up to move to Toronto for school, I cut all my favorite parts from my abstract expressionist paintings and glued them into this book. I really love this book. I still have it with me today. A small crop from a larger painting, and another small crop from a larger painting. I remember the entire of each painting from these small pieces. And here I am, a quarter century later, an artist in residence at Women's Studio Workshop upstate in Rosendale, New York. The new school was a 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week studio-based drawing and painting program. Afterwards, I transferred to NSCAD University, where I studied in intermedia. At the time, it was books, videos, and performance. I concentrated on books. Later on, I joined the Poetry Project in New York City, learning to write poetry free from the book structure. I apprenticed as a bookbinder with Richard Minsky in New York City and with Daniel Kalm in Northampton, Massachusetts. This was before artists' books were institutionalized. At the time, Columbia University had a book conservation program, but as I didn't want to work as a conservator, it wasn't the right fit for me. I did benefit from attending many of their structural workshops with visiting conservators. Apprenticing differed from bench training. At Minsky's, I was paid and bound books exclusively, no assistant work like trips to the post office, etc. At Daniel Kalm's, I paid him and he taught me privately, and then I continued working in a co-studio until ready for his next demo. Eventually, I was able to open my own for-hire binding studio and to teach bookbinding. I continued to make artist books. I'd like to mention our art history teacher at the new school, Wydessa Handelis. On the days she was teaching, we would arrive to find the walls completely covered in art reproductions cut out from art books and with her handwritten notes. I mean, hundreds of reproductions every week. She would leave everything in place, and during the week between her classes, the prints would get splashed with paint and charcoal dust, and we would pin up our own work on top of it. Then the next week it would repeat. Placing art history right in the studio alongside our student work in real time gave us roots, and it gave me a new way of looking at books. NSCAD was a conceptual art college back in the day, and when conceptual feminist artist Mary Kelly taught intermedia for a semester, it expanded my definition of conceptual art and feminist art and gave me new ideas about combining text and image in a gallery space. Some of you might know her postpartum document, which was first exhibited in sections in galleries and then eventually published as a book. At Center for Book Arts, Timothy Ely taught the advanced binding classes for many years. He was a member of the designer Bookbinders in the UK, and in his personal artist books developed his drumleaf binding, keeping his roots yet moving on. He inspired me to stick with apprenticing for so many years, knowing I could eventually use or lose this way of working in my own books. This is The Lovers from 1984, June Leaf artist, born 1929, died 2024. I posed as a spoon for neighbor and friend June Leaf, who was based in Nova Scotia and in New York City. I knew the background stories to June's painting and sculpture. Her work showed me that art could be personal and rural and urban and gallery oriented all at the same time. I had to invent my education as a book artist, but I wasn't self-taught. Today, what most differentiates my work is that I do not practice printing or printmaking. So I describe myself as a book artist, but also as a conceptual, urban, rural bookbinding poet, artist working in book form. This is a poster for my book arts class at NASCAD University. 3.5 weeks of books, May 1st to 24th, 2017, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 1 to 5. It was an intensive. Instructor Susan Mills was recently a featured artist at Fresh Kills Park, New York City, the world's largest urban landfill to park reclamation site. Her 2017 artist book, The Americans, references her Cape Breton neighbor Robert Frank's iconic black and white photo book from 1958. Mill's book is made from American plants, and its publication coincided with the Codex International Book Fair. She initiates and hosts the New York City podcast series, Bookbinding Now, The Photos Alan Rufersberg, Too Many Books, 2015. Um, yeah, that sounds like a good class. I started teaching bookbinding at NASCAD Continuing Education, then at the Cooper Union Public Programs in New York City, then at NASCAD's credit program and workshops throughout Canada and the US. At Cooper, I taught 4 or 5 classes in the evening, each of 25 people, every week for the semester, and did all the prep work for 100 to 125 people each week. I did this for many years. Structures were completed in the 3-hour class time each week. I later founded full tilt bookbinding classes on this model, 3-hour one-off workshops with a supported homework component and online registration, similar in some ways to the Zoom classes of today. These are some images of intro binding structures from these classes. Link stitch binding with wool covers, long stitch variation with leather tapes, leather long and link stitch binding with options to tighten up the sewing, which is often for beginners too loose. Flat back case with rounded corners and gusseted pocket. Paper phase box enclosure. Asian boxes with bone closures. Crisscross binding. Early on, it was called the secret Belgian binding. I loved it. After the name change, I seemed to have to lose interest. Rounded cloth case binding. Structure binding variation. Single quire historical model with papyrus cover boards. Two tray drop spine storage box. Sewing frame made and used in class. Small line press made and used in class. And girdle book with velvet jacket and velvet Turk's head knot, one of the most popular book structures in intro level book arts. This one took 6 hours instead of 3 because there's an inner book that's with wooden covers sewn on raised chords, etc. Bookbinding Now, it was a New York City-based audio podcast series addressing all aspects of the book. I initiated and hosted the series, posting on alternate Wednesdays from 2011 to 2019. It's currently an archive of 128 recordings. I started the series for my students. I had learned so much from listening in New York to binders, conservators, and book artists at Columbia, the New York Guild of Bookworkers, Center for Book Arts, Franklin Furnace, and Printed Matter, and hoped others could have this opportunity. As an archive, it continues to average about 100 listeners every day. This is my most popular book, True or False. It's an open-ended multiple that has been reprinted many times, with the price increasing from $5 to $30. It's a hand-bound hardcover accordion book printed with carved carrots and with handwriting across the bottom of the accordion.
True or false? Roland Barth's mother was a bookbinder.
This is my second most popular book, 26 Plants, edition of 50, published by Women's Studio Workshop in 2014. The letterpress cover and colophon meant it could be included in many artist book collections that were letterpress only. It has what is termed a unique binding structure. I no longer work with traditional book structures except for the single quire pamphlet. I use mechanical attachment rather than glue, and I do use starch paste as the binder for the paint that I make.
"26 Plants." Myrtle, sumac, corn husk, daylily, stiltgrass, yucca, mustard, peony, knotweed, pachysandra, geranium, hosta, carrot, knopf, sedge, cattail, pampas, burdock, onion, rye, leek, straw, rhubarb, iris, garlic, tomatillo. 26 Plants speaks to being in one place. Each page is made from a plant grown, harvested, made into paper, and bound into a book at one location. It is rough and chunky and smells of plants. In contrast to and with love for Ed Ruscha's iconic road book, 26 Gasoline Stations, slim and elegant and machine-made. Legend has it he shot the black and white photos from his motorcycle. 26 Plants, Susan Mills, 2014, Women's Studio Workshop publisher. 26 Gasoline Stations, Ed Ruscha, 1963, National Excelsior Press publisher.
This is my most popular Instagram post. It's had 10,000 views. My average is probably 200. It's a single quire book structure with undyed vellum cover with felted wool lining. Most of my books are editions of 1 to 6, occasionally up to 100. This means an audience of 1 to 6 and occasionally 100. It was fun to have a bigger audience for this book. Okay. Turn, turn, turn. It's a Chris Clarkson limp vellum variation for the structure and showing the use of traditional binding structures in my early artist books, especially historical structures.
Turn, turn, turn. A time to rend and a time to sew. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. As sung beautifully by Pete Seeger. The cover is clear red hand-dyed parchment, and the rectangles of color are hand-dyed by me. The sound is pages turning.
So now I'm going to show 4 recent books that I showed in August at Hermes Gallery, an artists cooperative in Halifax. The exhibit was titled Field Books, and it was organized by gallery member Barbara Launder. Hope 2023, edition of 20, handmade foraged plant paper and vintage stationery paper with milk paint made from plants growing in New York City's East River Park. This exhibit was an opportunity to show books hands-on without glass cases and to explore activating the gallery space while keeping the main site of activity inside the book being my favorite space. So here's the book at New York City's East River Park.
Hope. Ovenbird. Cooper's hawk. Morning walk hawk. Northern fricker. Kestrel on this. Ruby-crowned kinglets and black-throated blues. 3 crows, nuthatch just above mid-flower. Warblers, Cape May and Nashville, yellow-rumped and magnolia. Eastern towhee, monk parakeet. Morning dove, compost moon American redstarts, double owls, merlin, peregrine falcon, northern shoveler, pleated woodpecker. Thank you, Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers. Thank you, Marcella Durand. Urban bird phone photos during the COVID-19 lockdown and the dismantling of New York City's East River Park and during the park's AstroTurf phase. Thank you, true homemade milk paints.
This is the installation at Hermes Gallery.
This is a recent installation of my artist's book, Hope, at Hermes Gallery in Halifax, Nova Scotia. With this solo show of my artist books, my hope was to get the books out of glass vitrines to where they could be handled and read, and to activate the gallery space while keeping the main action inside the books. happy with the installation and with the possibilities going forward.
This is Daniel Casper Paint and Wallpaper 2024, edition of 14 with differing covers, elephant hide paper, dyed linen fabric cover, handmade paints from plants gathered on site in Nova Scotia. I work on all the pages for the edition at once. This is blue drying outside. And I mentioned that the paper is elephant hide.
Daniel Casper and Casper Daniel were twins. Casper Daniel stayed in their home community and fished. Daniel Casper moved to town and opened a paint store. It was the time of wooden ships. The town was a shipbuilding center, and every boat was coated in heavy oil paint to prevent rot and rust. The commercial and residential buildings were also wood. They too were covered top to bottom with paint. The shop flourished. It was known for quality paint and beautiful hand-mixed colors. And eventually it was bequeathed to his daughter. She added wallpaper and hired 5-year-old me. In those days before digital color matching, she taught me to mix colors by eye. We are named for the blue slate, my grandmother would tell me. See how blue it is? But look at the slate in the water, Susie. It looks more black than blue when it's wet. How about the golden seaweed attached to it, and the cloudy sky above, and the blue boat anchored out there? How does it make the rocks look? And what about a blue sky, or rain, or fog, or sunset, or sunrise, or moonlight? Everything affects the color, Susie. No, Joseph Albers of Black Mountain had nothing on Sadie Ellen of Blue Rocks.
And this is the installation at Hermes Gallery with photos from the videos on the wall. This is from the colophon in the book, in memory of my great-grandfather, Daniel Casper, and my grandmother, Sadie Ellen, and our paint and wallpaper store. I grew up to be an artist and mix colors almost every day. The fourth driest in 115 years, Field Notes, 2023, edition of 1, foraged urban plants for the paper, paints, dyes, and ink, foraged linen tapes and key tags for the structure, housed in a box. The book is meant to be hung.
The fourth driest in 115 years, Field Notes. With family that lived through the 1930s Great Depression, soil moisture feels wired to my DNA. Made with foraged urban waste. Connecting to the land in standing aside.
And this is the installation in the windows at Hermes Gallery.
This is a pretty good one. I think this is right.
Pages are traditionally sewn to linen tapes, and here the pages are so small they almost don't exist, as would be in a drought. This was a comment from the opening. I was very happy to hear it. Wash 2024, edition of 4, handmade paper, mostly not handmade by me, and handmade paint. This is titling the book. And this is in progress.
I love the colors of the spring fields when the snow has melted and the ground is still a little frozen. Nothing yet has grown and turned green. Crops are planted in long lines by GPS, and at harvest, the plants are cut down with the roots left in place. The next year, crops are planted between two of the last year's rows by making a slit and inserting the seed. These in-progress book pages are drawings of the slice and the patterns they make in the fields. This book, Squash, is about planting and growing and harvesting. Here's an excerpt. A deep seed hullessly, and I was quite comfortable deep down, transplanted and fugitive, and I was quite comfortable floating early Remy, set between corn rows fully, and I was quite comfortable tended and square harvest basket.
This is squash installed at Hermes.
Squash. I gardened and you, and I was quite comfortable humming red loam, a deep seed hullously, and I was quite comfortable deep down. Transplanted and fugitive, and I was quite comfortable floating early Remy, set between rows, fully scratched, and I was quite comfortable, tended and square harvest basket. Ran luminous and wild in the beds, and I was quite comfortable seed-cured and buckwheat, surprisingly prolific, oval and ranging, and I was quite comfortable U-turned and prominent handle, flat skin overheard and burnt orange, and I was quite comfortable flaunting overheard. Blocky, deep-ridged and sung to, and I was quite comfortable bathed and pollinated. Striking even without carving, and I was quite comfortable rambling and ready in 95 days. Soups, pies, toasted, and I was quite comfortable mid-November rummaging my pockets, a dried stalk, 2 seeds with strings, your elegy, and a plastic mitten.
Squash references planting, growing, and harvesting, and it's also a love poem. In our family, comfortable means very good. Quite comfortable means epic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Susan. That was really great. Are there any questions for Susan? So I'm just curious if things changed when you moved back to Canada and kind of how you thought making it work, or
But I never really moved to the US. Like I live in all these places simultaneously.
okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I went to school there, but returned
But
on
you were
summer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Nice. How important was that time with kind of some of the instructors in the US kind of to
Well,
how you make work now?
Well, one thing I would say is that, you know, being in a big city, I mean, I'm sure it's true of Toronto too, you have a lot more colleagues and a lot more, I mean, most of my teachers, if they're still alive, I'm still in contact with them, and there's like tons of other people. So, you know, that's lucky, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, in my own work, I just primarily work by myself in a room. So yeah.
Are there any? Oh, Alison.
Hi, I'm actually kind of intrigued by your video documentation and how their kind of works in and of themselves, and how I was thinking about the last one with squash, how you're reading a poem while simultaneously going through the book, and what that kind of documentation does to the life of the book for you.
Well, I mean, actually, I thought we would have a big movie screen and that you all would be reading along. So the sound's kind of ambient, you know, it's not the best sound. I primarily made them for Instagram, but then you're very close to your own phone, but strangely enough, I think I mentioned that at NASCAD, I was in intermedia for like 6 years, which was books, performance, and video. And everybody always said I wanted to be a filmmaker. They're like, why are you wasting time on books? But I really like books because they're, you know, I show in galleries. So like, I'm not with my books, which I like, you know, video seemed really confrontational. It's like, and performance too. But I actually do really like making the videos. And on my website, I have like, I've read many books. I mean, I have hundreds of books, but some, and I like it because I sell all my work and then it's gone. I mean, if it's an edition of 1 or 5, I mean, that's the audience for it. I don't really, other than 2 books that were published by Women's Studio Workshop, I'm not in any libraries where people can borrow books. So having them that way, it's fun for me. I mean, I started in the COVID lockdown. So I suppose spending a lot of time alone. Well, and I mean, also, I mean, I was like, I have no photographic, I don't know anything about photography. I use a phone, but like, I was like, should I try to fake a studio and like set up a fake studio to photograph my work? And I was like, it's not really about that. And it's also made from natural materials. And often it's in the place that inspired it or where I got the materials too. So.
I have to say, I'm finding lots of artists, book artists, who are using video. You've done this as well with some of your work, recent work, Marlene, kind of going through the book. I remember being so frustrated in the years when you were lucky to look at one spread or just the cover. So it's great that you're doing that. So are there any other questions?
I was just curious about the true or false. Was Roland Barthes' mother a bookbinder?
Yes. Yeah. So I remember, and I have another book that's kind of similar, and it's, I can't exactly remember the text, but it's based on John Cage's first performances were performed by bookbinders in San Francisco because his partner was a bookbinder, and she asked her friends to come and perform it and also record it. So just a couple bookbinding
That's great.
pieces of information.
That's great.
Could you talk a little more about the poetry aspects of it? I can see the connection with the New York School. And I just wonder, like, text to image, I know they're integrated, but could talk a little more about your poetic interests and reading and that sort of thing.
Well, I kind of started as a kid doing the poems with the images. So I've always done that. And at one point, I think at one point, I just felt like my writing wasn't good enough in a way, like so I just at random chose the Poetry Project in New York because I lived near them, and they're sort of descendants of the New York School. So I mean, I would take 3 workshops a semester, 10 weeks long. It was like I was a full-time student there, and so that probably does show in my writing. I really like writing. I mean, when I was there, I didn't tell anyone I was a bookbinder, because I felt poetry books 50 to 100, I'd be asked to do so much work for very little money. But you know, now I do things for them, like as a binder and stuff. And you know, I wondered, would I just abandon the book form? But I really like the two together, and it's kind of hard on these to like, my books are really tactile. They really smell of plants, and it's just different than reading it or hearing it. And probably for poetry, I like hearing it better than reading it.
You mentioned on some of your books, natural paints and inks. Do you make them yourself? Excellent. Are they watercolor?
They're just, well, I use like starch paste that we use for bookbinding as a sort of binder in them. So I guess they're closer to acrylic paints or something, but there's no plastic.
Oh, I'm just really curious about your process when it comes to treating books as installation. Is that something you think of beforehand, or is it something that you think about after making the book and it becomes an installation, or is it like, I just wanted to know your process behind it, I guess.
Well, my process is a lot like yours, actually, yeah. And I read the same books. I mean, I guess at one point, maybe it was probably just around before COVID. I really felt like I was kind of feeling like I was never going to have any more shows in galleries. I had a lot of book shows in galleries when I was young, but then it seemed like all the shows were group shows and everything was in a case showing either one page spread or the cover. And I didn't, like, I'm happy to be in community, but it didn't really mean a lot to me. And so I, like, in advance, my books are all, they can be read that fast. So you can read them just standing up in a gallery quickly. They're all like that, really. But no, the other parts, I just kind of winged it. Because I was thinking, if you have like a book with 40 paintings, that could be an entire show. Like, and instead it was like a closed book on a shelf. So I didn't want to just maybe put images from the book up on the wall, but making the videos kind of showed me to kind of expanded things a bit, like having photos of them outside, or the Hope birds were on wires with clothespins. So I'm still really, it's new to me. That was my first show that way. And I was pretty happy with it. And kind of now I'm getting a lot more ideas. But I try not to think about it too much, to quote an earlier artist presentation.
Great. Online, someone asked, where can I find your work on Instagram or other sites? Where do you post these videos?
I have a website, Susan Mills Artist Books, and then you'll find my Instagram site because it's called Minetta Lane, but it's probably better to find it through my website.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Susan. That was great.
Thanks.